Departamento de Ciências da Comunicação, FCSH, UNL.
Very charming and kind introduction. Thank you. I'd like to thank Sergio, Paolo and the other organisers from NECS for what has already been a very fruitful and enjoyable day at this conference. And I'm delighted to have been invited and feel very honoured to have been invited. Thank you. Right, my talk is hopefully a short talk, and mostly it's going to be about 50% some extracts from clips from films. So you can fall asleep quite a long time, first of all. Actually, they're intermittent all the way through. I hope the technology works. We've checked it out. Perhaps it's... I've got a few slides. Two quotes. Mary Ann Owen, she had written, "The image does not speak its own relation to time. As a result, film is therefore a record of time, but a non-specific, non-identifiable time, a disembodied, unanchored time. For Deleuze, cinema's time images shatter the empirical continuation of time, the chronological succession, the separation of the before and the after." It's addressing those two ideas that I'm concerned with this evening. My talk addresses how we are engaged by the temporal relations that film gives rise to in its audiovisual representation of the past, exemplified by the flashback, which is my topic here. The representation of the past within a present or now time of the filmic narration. My aim is to make clearer how the project of seeing anew, defamiliarization, various terms that we might use for this, that seeing anew in our encounter with reality that has been the concern of the arts in modernity and in postmodernity, depending on how we think that, is how this is engaged, this seeing anew is engaged by the temporal relations of cinema. Cinema was a metaphor for thinking about human perception in the early 20th century, Bergson, and now it accompanies the metaphor for digital networks in Deleuze. So my discussion will be focused through two questions relating to time and to the digital. First, what does it mean to say that we experience time? Time is spatial and embodied, in that it is movement, change, that alerts us to temporality, producing a cognizance of a past before our present, and a future that is after. We think of events and actions in terms of their time, as a remembering of the past, or anticipation of a future. And we think of it as measured as the amount of time required for an action or event. We think memory, however, as remembrance, recall, or recollection. And we experience memory as an eruption of the past into the present. A Proustskian Madeleine moment, a déjà vu, a flashback, as a past now time in the present now time. In contrast to recollection, the present is, Henri Bergson argued, that which acts upon us, which makes us act. It is sensory and it is motor. Our present is, above all, the state of our body. Our past, on the contrary, is that which acts no longer, but which might act and will act by inserting itself into a present sensation of which it borrows the vitality. It is true, he says, that from the moment when the recollection actualizes itself in this manner, it ceases to be a recollection and becomes once more a perception, matter of memory. Central here is the concept of duration, which Bergson emphasizes, and I quote again, is not merely one instant replacing another. If it were, there would be never anything but the present. No prolonging of the past into the actual, no evolution, no concrete duration. Duration is the continuous progress of the past which gnaws into the future and which swells as it advances. Page 78, creative evolution. Bergson uses the illustration of waiting and of impatience, actually throughout that book, arguing that succession, I quote again, is an undeniable fact even in the material world. He says, if I want to mix a glass of sugar and water, I must, willy-nilly, wait until the sugar melts. This little fact is big with meaning, for here the time I have to wait is not the mathematical time which would apply equally well to the entire history of the material world, even if that history was spread out instantaneously in space. No, instead it coincides with my impatience, that is to say with a certain portion of my own duration, which I cannot protract or contract as I like. It isn't a film I can cut. It is no, that's me, going back to Bergson. It is no longer, he says, something thought, it is something lived. It is no longer a relation, it is an aspect. And that was from Creative Evolution. And continuing, he says, real duration is that in which each form flows out of previous forms, while adding to them something new, and is explained by them as much as it explains them. A key example that I always use is music, but here today, of course, I'm looking at film. And here too, in Bergson's words, we can hear the echo of the language becoming, and meanwhile, two important ideas. But I'm using Bergson here because he emphasizes the embodied relation, and it is this which I'm interested in relation to affect and meaning. My second question is, does the digital change or extend our experience of time? The digital is a technology for managing data, information that may be numerical, auditory, visual. But retrieval, crucial for us all in trying to get back the information and data, or playback, must mimic the analogical, involving an inversion of the digital encoding. For film, the video codec projection must also reproduce the effect of intermittent motion of the mechanical cine projector. Emphasizing this, I'm trying to downplay something magical about the digital transformation. The digital, I suggest, has three key attributes which I want to focus on. It makes certain processes easier, such as number crunching, or focusing when you've got a camera, also through size with mini cameras that are lightweight and thus more maneuverable. But it also enables programming of certain technology, such as surveillance cameras that can track specific kinds of behaviour or speech in public spaces. Watch out if you're at St Pancras nowadays in London. And it also, being programmable, can be controllable from a distance. Bombing over Afghanistan. But also passing cameras through human arteries and so forth. So it's something that's made easier by the digital. The digital makes what we do faster with the word processing or making films. It is a development of the radical change in the pace introduced in the 19th century with the steam engine, with rail transport, the motor car, and the typewriter and stenograph. Thirdly, the digital connects us spatially in real time. The telegraph, the telephone, the fax machine are all analog forms that are displaced by the digital, which has through email, voicemail, the web and social networking transformed the ways in which we communicate and interact in terms of time. Of course, the digital also uses algorithmically, producing networks that are not managed by us as users. And here, I'm emphasizing that this is outside of an audio-visual mode of connection. The speed and ease and connectivity of the digital enables what we have come to call real-time interaction in new and more complex ways. Time itself is a perception of the temporality of the past, of the present and future, that are thought as measured in hours, days and years, measured as yesterday, today and tomorrow. The terms real time, historical time, actuality and event are each used to mark out the temporal difference between the experienced present, the now time, and its later encounter in remembrance, through our own memories and through our prosthetic devices of audiovisual recording. So, my first clip will be from a wonderful film by Manu Lukas, which is an art video. It's an extraordinary film which uses and focuses on the issue of CCTV. As you may know, Britain has the most cameras in the world. It's made using film CCTV in actuality on the streets of London. It's from that it draws its live action, and it's real time. But it also presents a failure of memory and of remembering, and this as a possible after of the before of digital culture.
Another echo. She emerges from its spell. The pulse of real time impels her again. Later, the woman will go shopping. She has an elegant home in a handsome tower block. The pulse of real time orients the life of every citizen. Eating, resting, going to work, getting married. Every act is tied to real time. And every act leaves a trace of data, a footprint in the snow of noise. The new machine monitors these data traces to ensure that all is well. People have become discontented. Anxiety about the future and guilt over the past cause great unhappiness. The present was continuously in short supply. Then a reform of the calendar was proposed to dispense with the troublesome past and future and fill everyone's lives with the perfect present. An advanced technology called the new machine was developed to supersede the past and the future. And soon afterwards, the system of real time was unanimously accepted. The new machine broadcasts pulses of real time that guide each life along its optimal path. The new machine surveys the city, monitoring the data traces left by every citizen. The new machine dispatches overseers to correct any errors and deviations instantly. In the numerous world of the new machine, each moment of real time saturates consciousness. There is no memory, no anticipation. There is no past, so there can be no guilt or regret, and no future, therefore no anxiety or fear.
History talks about two kinds of experience. The unhistorical of those who don't have history and those who cannot stop having history. And he places those who are unhistorical as those who are happy. And the film illustrates that. However, it also is exploring the means to oppose the dominance of real time, the avoidance of memory through escape into the real time of doing and being and acting. Here, acting digitally. Everybody's got a circle on their face because to use the CCTV recording, she had to blank out the faces of those people who weren't her. She walked around all the cameras to get herself filmed. Moving on, however, to films in our time, which I think is and continuing my concern for our time. It's different to communication devices such as the telephone, two-way radio, and the mobile phone, or the internet and Skype, which each involve a doing in an exchange of words and now images in the present real time between people separated by space, in an interaction that, although mediated, is an embodied and interactive experience in reality. Live broadcasting, as we used to have, no longer, however, as radio and television, or in the webcam, or indeed in CCTV, is an overhearing or overseeing in the present of real time. But unlike theatre or a football match, our embodied relationship is different. We're separated geographically, while we are cognitively in two spaces, here and there, but physically located in one place, only here. And it's this doubling, the over there and elsewhere of images and sounds that we cannot interact with, and yet are present to us, make an impact on us, which raises the question of our relation to them as reality. I suggest. Our encounter with past real time arises, on the one hand, through its indexical traces in diverse forms of material record, arising at the same temporal moment, such as the clock stopped at the moment of the bombing of Hiroshima, or the watermarks left after Hurricane Katrina. The photograph indexes time as the instant of the camera's shutter, opening and closing, but it neither measures that time nor records it, though time may be indexed within the image by the angle of the sun, the style of clothes, and so on. On the other hand, we encounter the past through its representation in the accounts of those present within that former now time. In speaking, we use tenses to qualify verbs in order to distinguish an event or action in the past, or in the present, or one about to happen, or could happen. When we say it's getting dark, or I'm watching TV, we're using the present tense in referring to an immediate, direct, and continuous experience of the here and now. In contrast, the recording of past sights and sounds and speech by film or video are experienced in viewing afterwards as a now time of people moving, doing, being, in a durational continuousness, just as we live life as now. Hence the phrase that I'm using, now time, or real time, for live sounds and images. But when we watch the recorded past sights, we are, after all, simply flashing back, which in film produces a particular fiction or as if effect. In a much earlier article, Brian Henderson comments that classical cinema reacts to tense shift as though to a cataclysm. The viewer must be warned at every level of cinematic expression, in sounds, in images, and in written language, lest he or she be disoriented. And Deleuze writes, the flashback is a conventional and extrinsic device. It is generally indicated by a dissolving, and images that it introduces are often superimposed or meshed. It is like a sign with the words, watch out, recollection. It can therefore indicate by convention a causality which is psychological, but still analogous to a sensory motor determinism, and despite its circuits, only confirms the progression of a linear narration. Well, I'll give up talking about flashback then, maybe. It's clearly not of interest to Deleuze, and yet, of course, it is. So I want to pull away from that view of the flashback and introduce it in a way that, for me, engages the problem of time and the game of time, the fiction of time in cinema. As a cinematic device, the flashback introduces a specific fictionality distinct from the fiction of the story as such. For when it portrays in sounds and images the remembering by a character of past time, it transgresses the spatio-temporal coherence of dramatic, that is, mimetic performance, and breaks the diegetic illusion of continuous time and space, and thereby making apparent a controlling narrator. Not only is the remembered imaged, whereas of course it is always thought, some of us may remember in images, but not only is it is a remembered image in film, it is shown in the same way that we see and hear the diegetic present time of the film. Thus we see and hear the subject in the past of her remembering. The past is remembered, thought of image, is typically given an equivalent cinematic reality to the represented present. Whether subjective or objective, the cinematic flashback is, I argue, a fiction of seeing and hearing across time with the now time of images and sounds and present tense of speech that we must understand as the past time of the diegesis in the present time, present tense of the film's storytelling. The subjective flashback is always potentially unreliable. Hitchcock's stage fright, where the villain introduces a direct lie, or David Fincher's Fight Club, which presents a false time of past, which is filtered by the narrator's paranoid psychosis. We all have many more examples, I think. But the case I want to move to is Secret Beyond the Door and Fritz Lang. It demonstrates, the opening here, the temporal complexity possible in film, and the complexity introduced by the voiceover narrator who speaks in the present and in the past tense over images that are imagined and also real. The latter being shown by an objective camera position, views of a church. And then suddenly we see the narrator entering, for she says, "This is my wedding day."
I remember, long ago I read a book that told the meaning of dreams. It said that if a girl dreams of a boat or a ship, she will reach a safe harbor. But if she dreams of daffodils, she is in great danger. But this is no time for me to think of danger. This is my wedding day. Something old, something new, something borrowed, something blue. Something old as this church, 4 centuries old. Mark says it's a felicitous structure. Its vaultings, pilasters, walls, its altars, its chandeliers, tuned to a perfect harmony, built so that here only events of joy can happen. 400 years of joy. And something new is Mark himself. And love is new for me. My heart is pounding so. The sound of it drowns out everything. It's said that when you drown, your whole life passes before you like a fast movie.
Here it is, 12.0. My young and gaudy sister has broken another engagement.
Darling, I never dreamed of marrying you.
Trombone player. Heaven forbid. I'd sooner see you marry that witch doctor of yours.
Curtis, he's a brilliant psychoanalyst.
Right. I'm slightly taking time. My other example is from Hiroshima Mononoke, of the complexity of time. But I will move on rather than taking our time too much. I think people are familiar with Hiroshima Mononoke. Yeah. I will, however, just show, I will show the third clip. This is I've taken the 2 flashbacks to the death of her German lover. Here she is on the balcony after having a rather wonderful time with her Japanese lover, as you can see. Oops, the wrong thing here. It's a subjective flashback motivated by the camera's memory. The twitching hand prompts the flashback. But in that flashback, you'll note that it's motivated by her look, but the camera pulls back to reveal her. She's suddenly in the scene. Similarly, we have a discrepancy between her remembering and what we see is not from simply her point of view. The flashback undoes time in being simply the subjective memory and image. At the beginning of the film, we see the 2 lovers making love, and then cut to the footage, documentary footage that René had shot for the documentary he was initially commissioned to make. But in that viewing of the documentary material, we hear a man's voice telling the woman, you saw no hospital, there is no hospital, you saw nothing. As we see the images that she's talking about. So that the recorded reality is directly contradicted by statements in voiceover, introducing an indeterminacy, and uncertainty into the temporality, and a temporality that relates to what we can recognize is real actuality. So this is the context of thinking about the flashback that I want to further explore. The documentary film's recording of reality represented is not usually considered a flashback, yet it along with newsreel footage constitutes an audiovisual archive of past reality, a public form of memory that we may appropriate as our own, and thus it becomes how we remember. The fiction of archive footage as flashback, which I am proposing, is the past time present again audiovisual, which we experience as our now time or affective encounter. My example, very briefly here, is Spike Lee's When the Levees Broke, a requiem in 4 acts. Very often seen as quite a conventional documentary with its wonderful plush music coming up and so forth. It is, of course, about the devastation of New Orleans following Katrina hurricane. The sequence here involves newsreel archive footage edited with interviews, which merges with the remembered accounts given by the participants, just like the flashback in film.
I walked over to the sewer drain, saw a man inside the street, and I could hear this low, rumbling gurgle coming at me. It sounded like just bubbling boil, and it just spit out all over my shoes. And I started hearing clang, clang, clang down the street, and it was the manhole covers popping off, and the water was just blowing out the manhole covers, and it was coming out of the storm drains, and it was filling up. And you could see it coming down the side streets. You know, it wasn't like a wall of water, but it was coming out quick, and you could see it was starting to rise up real quick.
And I went to my front door, and I had water up over my head. If I'd have stepped out on my step, I'd have drowned.
Well, throw your life preserver, okay? There it is, you see it? Put your feet on anything. Go for that life preserver right there. Don't let it drift away from you. Where's that life preserver? All right, take the life preserver. So water your feet. Come on, man.
Come on, you can do it. Get go. Let go. Come on.
Yes, you can.
The life preserver.
Don't panic. Don't panic. Just come to us. Once you get to us, we can get you into the boat. Come on. There you go. Don't panic. Don't panic. Just go right on the top of that.
I went out on the second floor porch to look over.
Every time I watch, particularly the last clip, I get scared for her. Can she do it? Realised in the flashback, in fiction and in documentary, is our desire to go back in time, to know again, or to know properly for the first time, what happened, and to re-experience the past through the senses, and not only through our mental reconstruction. That is, through memory. This fiction effect, like the ontological paradox of the cinematic image that has exercised philosophers and film theorists, arises not because the image is an illusion, for the images are optically real, but because although we are separated in space and in time from the images, the absent but real objects, persons and places, we see, nevertheless engage our beliefs such as to produce real emotional and mental responses. It is as if the scenes and experiences we are watching are happening right now and are not merely past events. That we are not spatially and temporally present, however, is central to our affective response. We cannot intervene. In my second example, we have a move between objective narration in the film and something more direct.
Everyone would gravitate to the convention center. There's people started dropping people off at the convention center, then it just spread like word of mouth, and then that area was kind of high and dry.